good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are. Thank you so much for joining us in this amazing conversation today. We will be talking about designing courses students really want to engage, even in the age of AI. I know that there's a lot of talking about what AI can do and one cannot. So we're going to talk here about what really we can do in this time that continues to change. So we're going to move into the next slide, and I'm going to take the opportunity to give our speakers the time to introduce themselves. So Alan, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Alan Hecht. I'm the Director of Instructional Technology at Drexel University's LeBeau College of Business, and I'll just say that I've been working on developing online courses since the late 1900s.
I can say that. I can say the same, Alan. I think my first introduction to online education was in the late 90s. I remember working with one of the very first LMSs at the time. I think it was WebCT version 2. And now, so I've been around the block for some time now and seen a lot of evolution in the educational technology space. So it's interesting to have that point of view. My role is the Senior Director of Digital Learning at NC State, and my background is instructional design. And I've really focused my career in helping faculty design courses and online programs that are not just effective, but are engaging and hopefully enjoyable for students. And my thinking, being an instructional designer, my thinking and my work is very shaped by social learning, adult learning, and motivation theories. So I'm really interested in how you can design blended and online learning experiences where students are intrinsically motivated to contribute, not just doing what they need to do to get by or get a good grade. So in terms of my Yellow Dig background, I was involved in evaluating the platform for NC State back in 2019. So I was part of helping run that pilot. And so we did adopt it, and we've had it available to our instructors for about 5 years now, and getting overwhelmingly positive feedback from our students and faculty. So I'm really excited to talk to you all today.
That is amazing. And I can thank you enough for accepting to be part of this conversation. So thank you again for joining us and to be a part of this webinar. So we're going to start going into the matter that we are going to talk about here. So Katie, if you can just continue to the next slide. So we know that a lot of engagement problems that we are facing right now in our classes come from the design that we are creating. So we see that engagement drops, and the usually respond is to go with more reminders, more discussion requirements, and more checkpoints. But when we do this, usually what a student see is post one, reply twice, complete the task, and move on. And nothing really happens in the conversation. They don't feel that they are being part. So we think sometimes that a structure doesn't always create more engagement. It just creates more compliance. So what is the most common that you see of the ones that we talk about, Alan?
Sure. I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is that history of the post once and reply twice approach. I really feel like that came out of Web 1.0 and Web 2.0, wherein social media wasn't even really a thing at the time, and people did not know how to interact online. And so we were giving them this model to make them feel comfortable, to let them know that they met the expectations and that it was okay to reply to each other, and that sort of thing. But we've stayed there, and I think that it's now holding us back. And if you ask students to post once and reply to two or three classmates, it's almost insulting now. They don't need to know that. They know how to interact online, and it actually turns students off. Instead, I think that we need to find the aspects of our courses that are the most engaging, and then let the students loose on those topics. As I loved how Stacy said, wanting students to tap into that motivation where you don't have to manufacture it. They want to get involved. They want to contribute. And that's what we really need to see faculty move toward. The model we had worked at a time, but it just needs to evolve beyond that now. Stacy, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I'm completely with you there. And I'm definitely one of those instructional designers that provided that advice that to have that kind of structure so that you can be clear with your expectations. That post once, reply twice. And also, you probably wouldn't be surprised if that's all that students do, is that you set the bar low and you set those minimal expectations. Then sometimes they're very busy. They can be very stressed out. They might be working a full-time job. So you might see that that's all that they do, is they do exactly the minimal amount of work that you've asked them. And again, that's just very transactional behavior, and that kind of design invites that. So I think about, the saying, if you always do what you always get done, you always get what you always got. So I think it's absolutely true. We're still using that old playbook, and we haven't really modernized it for this social media age. So yes, I think that one needs to be tossed away, and we have to adopt new practices, which does require change on the instructor's part. And I think that change can sometimes feel uncomfortable. I hear from a lot of faculty that they're not using social media, so they may be the ones that aren't as comfortable with allowing conversations to more, naturally evolve and not being in the driver's seat. So I've seen a lot of discomfort on instructors' part because it does shift the onus of sort of control, and it can be hard. So I think knowing that you're designing this very well and very intentionally is sort of the secret sauce.
I love that. And I think that one of the things that you mentioned, Stacy, is one of the biggest problems that we face when we are trying to implement new engagement ways, change. A lot of people are afraid of change. So let's go into the next slide to continue with the conversation. So I love this part because, we're all looking to get our students more engaged in classes and to be a part of the conversation and to share what they have learned with their experience or with what they are living in the moment. But we don't really know what makes engagement persist. So here we have come with some options that I would like you to let us know what you feel and what you have seen. So one of the things that we see is that feeling welcome, being recognized, be able to connect with peers and make spaces comfortable for contributing in the conversation while you are in the class. So these small design choices can completely change how a course feels. So which have you seen that really works, Stacy?
Well, in looking at this and thinking about that question, I was really thinking about, that very first thing, that feeling welcomed when you open the door. If you kind of think about when you walk into a party, you kind of know when you walk in, like, if you're going to have a good time or not. So I feel very strongly that the first Yellow Dig experience from the very beginning sets the tone. And it's also your opportunity to explain what this space is about, why you're doing it. So I think from the very get-go, you want to describe what is going to be happening there. This is a place to share ideas, share resources, examples, ask questions, learn from each other. And also from the very beginning, you got to model it, because it takes a little more, show and tell. And then I think that instructors can pull back a little bit, but I really think you have to model if you're looking for a more conversational, friendly kind of exchange, if you're looking to be able to challenge each other, but in a respectful way, you do have to model that. So I think from the very start, if you pose more thought-provoking and point of view questions, you're more likely to get thoughtful answers. If you also connect ideas you're seeing across posts, you might encourage students to build on each other. And I really think starting out, if you can do a low pressure activity, you could do like a two truths and a lie can be a fun thing to do. You could do the 3-2-1, where you have students do an introductory reading and they share 3 takeaways, 2 questions, and 1 muddy point. Or you could do a meme share where you ask them to find a meme that relates to the course content. But the idea is that it's low pressure and kind of fun, where you, from the very beginning, you're setting the tone. And then that might be a party that they want to come to. And I'd love to hear if you have ideas in the chat. But I really think if they don't feel welcome from the beginning, it's really, really hard to recover from that. Alan, what do you think about this?
Yeah, so of those four that are on the screen now, I think that being recognized is one that I think has a lot of empowerment for students. Clout is a thing online, and students like to earn it in classes as well. There are subreddits, there are, news boards and discussion areas online that people aren't getting a grade. They're not getting paid to participate in those. They want to participate in those. And one of the motivating factors is that they get a reputation. You see that this person is the top 1% poster. You see that this person has a lot of clout. And clout can happen in the online discussions when instructors call out students for good, meaningful contributions. It motivates other students to also contribute in a quality format. Now, Yellow Dig has something that I use called accolades. It's like special awards that come with a Yellow Dig point award as well. So by earning that accolade, the student not only gets the clout in that everybody can see that that little badge has been given to them, but they also get extra points earned through that. And so we see, for instance, I have an accolade that I make that's called must read. In other words, I see a student who's contributing something that I'm like, you encapsulated this perfectly. I'm going to mark that with a must read accolade so that other students know that if they only were to read a few of the posts today, that's one of the ones that they want to read to catch up on the conversation. But even in old-fashioned LMS discussions, I've seen our faculty do shout outs like, hey, that's a great point, and then name the student by name or talk about how these three students really hit on some key aspects. And you're giving them, again, that clout. And those students pipe up and say, well, I got recognized. I want to do more of that. And other students will say, hey, they got recognized. I want to see if I can post something that's meaningful next week. And so this way, the students feel that they're not just going through the hoops. You're hearing that theme over and over again, that they're actually making meaningful contribution to the discussion in valuable ways. And I think that that ends up giving it the momentum that carries you through the term.
Yeah, amazing. I love the way that you say that recognition helps people also to engage because that is true. We all love being recognized. We all love to feel that our work is meaning something, that people are seeing what we're doing. So I think that is a very important aspect, especially when you're learning something new, because you also want this recognition that you are understanding what you're being taught. So that's amazing. Going into the next slide, please. Kate. So in here, we're going to try to make a little switch in design. So we know that we are looking to design for contribution and not for compliance. So our goal in every class must be that we're not going to force participation, but we're going to create an environment where students naturally want to share ideas, ask questions, build each other's thinking, and connect learning to real experiences because this helps to create a real community and support learning with shared experiences. So we know that at this point, the goal isn't automation, it's visibility and sustainability. So, what is the principal need that you see when working with faculty, Alan?
Sure, I'll start. So it's interesting when we compare online and in-person class discussions, because I can be in your class. I can be listening to my classmates. I can nod. I can, really be engaged, but not verbally. And you would probably still give me attendance credit or participation credit for being there today. But when we move those discussions online, we have this line in the sand that in order for me to put a grade next to your name, you need to have a contribution and you need to have a contribution that I count worthy as of earning the points. If you stick with that model, where the faculty member is asking the questions and the students are responding with their answers, then you're perpetuating that stringent online discussion model. And so I feel that breaking that mold is still our biggest need. If we create a place for free flowing ideas, of a learning community, then we're empowering students to communicate in a way that works for them. One of the things that I like about online discussions versus in person is that if you have a class of 40, 50, 60 students, you don't have the time to allow everyone to be able to contribute. But online, they can. They can all contribute if they would like to. So, one of the examples, just to maybe break this down a little bit more practically, in a marketing class here at the business college, we'll have a faculty member use Yellow Dig or the online discussion tool to say, when you are out and about, look for our marketing principles at work in the real world. And then post what you see. So they might see a roadside billboard. They might see an end cap in a grocery store. They might see a television commercial that hits on something that they were talking about this past week in chapter 2, and they will then post that, and then others will say, oh, I saw the same commercial and I had the same thought, or they'll bring in a different example. And so even if the contributions that are happening in the online discussion are somewhat adjacent to the key principles and concepts of the course, the fact that it's happening organically and that students are contributing on their own is going to be much better than if you say, well, here's your prompt for today, for this week, and you respond, but you're doing that really just by jumping through hoops and just because you're required to. So I think that that's, in my sense, that's kind of the biggest need that I would say.
I love that. And I think that you mentioned something really important when you were talking about the learning community, because we know that we learn from others, and all of us have different experiences. And when we get to share that experiences and complement our experiences with what our peers are saying, it creates another level of learning. And I think that's the key of actual learning and developing when you are in a class. So let's go into our next slide, Kate, please.
Well, before we move on, I wanted to see if Stacey had
Yes.
anything else to add to that topic, in terms of the
Yeah.
principal need.
Well, I think your comment about having to break the mold, I think that is really very, very true. I was also thinking about sort of sustainable practices, because I have seen some instructors get really excited and engaged and then feel challenged to keep up. So in terms of when, where, and how to be engaged, I think that can be challenging to figure out, like the exact timing and sort of the tone, and where can their efforts be sort of have maximal impact. And it's definitely quality over quantity. So I've seen, have you ever heard of the expression having a success disaster? Right, where it's like your community is so successful and it's so lively, you're like, how do I keep up with all of this? I think I was in a previous seminar and I heard a suggestion to, like, when you have your morning cup of coffee, maybe scroll through your community, and that's a good time, check in, give some accolades, make some connections. But I do think it can be hard to figure that out. And I think with experience, instructors will develop a better sort of cadence and approach. But in terms of needs, I do think that instructors have a need to talk to each other and to share with each other what's working and what's not. So, we're definitely a very big fan of having learning communities of practice. So if you can even casually and informally get together with your colleagues and talk about what you're doing, what you're finding, what's working, I think that can be, so helpful. So I think they need their fellow peers to talk to compare prompts, compare examples, compare war stories, so to speak. So, we're at NC State, we try to create those kinds of platforms for people to talk to each other about their teaching. And that way you don't always have to learn everything yourself firsthand. You can learn from others that have gone before you.
That's a great point, Stacey. Also, because everything is changing so fast that we have to keep talking to each other of what works and what worked for me in this class that may work for you. But you know that I did a little switch on what you told me and it improved. So we keep learning and we keep adapting and we keep changing. So that is the best thing that we can share with all the people that are here today, that we have to adapt and we have to embrace change instead of being afraid of. So now we can go into the next slide. So I know that there's a lot of conversation here and there and everywhere about IA and what it's doing. So I think that in here we are not trying to put AA as a monster because it can help. It can help us to support efficiency, brainstorming, and to have some content support. But what we have to acknowledge here is that it cannot replace peer learning, belonging, and the most important one is human connection. That is why course design matters more than ever. So, how do you see that IA is changing education? And if you agree that it cannot replace the three things that we mentioned before. So, I think that this time goes Stacy first.
Well, yeah, this is definitely a big, big question. So, how is AI changing education? I don't know. We might need a separate seminar for that. And also, I get nervous now talking about AI because you've seen all of these commencement speakers getting booed when they bring up AI. So there's a lot of complicated feelings about this for sure for both faculty and students. So I guess I just wanted to reflect on you saying can't replace peer learning, belonging, human connection. And I do feel that I agree, it's true, but it can certainly sort of simulate some of that. So I think, when I'm thinking about, in terms of, when I say simulate, students can, with really savvy prompt engineering, they can write very human sounding, very personalized responses to your yellow dig prompts, right? So they can do that. And it's very, very easy to do. So in my mind, oh, and it could be helpful. Like you said, let's not make it a monster, the enemy. Because think about, for me, what about someone for whom English is not their first language? They may have these great ideas, but they want to check it. So they might put it in, whatever, what have you, Gemini or something, and say, did I phrase this right? Is my grammar correct? Is my punctuation correct? And that might be why they're doing it, but it's with the right prompting, it's their ideas. They just want to check and make sure that they're phrasing it properly. So I just think we all have to think very deeply and broadly about why students would use AI. So some of those motivations, kind of going back to motivation theory. And I think also looking at the literature can be very helpful in this area too. But I think a lot of instructors will think, well, they're using AI because they procrastinated or they didn't read and they're looking for a shortcut. Okay, that can be true, but it also can be true that they're very insecure or nervous about their writing and they don't want to be embarrassed in front of their peers. It can also be true that they're overwhelmed and anxious because the workload in the course, or maybe that you have a very high point value and they're feeling nervous about getting those points. So they want to have an excellent, excellent post, or maybe they find the assignment really boring and they just perceive it as busy work. So they are, offloading that work to AI. So, I mean, we really can't always know the motivations or the reasons. So I think, I don't think you can AI proof, but I think you can make kind of more AI aware decisions. So I think the idea of AI proofing, just throw that out the window. So I was thinking of making more AI aware use of yellow dig. I think there's three things you can do. And then I'd love to hear what Alan thinks about this too. Of course, you have to have value-rich conversations. There has to be some value there. Students have to find value when they're going and they're engaging. So that's really important. And what that value is, that can look different for your discipline. It could look different if it's an undergraduate course or if it's a graduate level course. So, but they have to be finding some value. I think also it has to be low enough stakes, not no stakes, but low enough stakes where students are not feeling so anxious or nervous to chase those points. So it's sort of a art and science to figure out to make it worthwhile that they are getting acknowledgement and credit for their effort, but the stakes aren't so high that it's making them very anxious. And then the instructor that is present and supportive, if they also feel that, I think that they may be more motivated to genuinely contribute as themselves, and they won't be worried necessarily about their grammar or their, if they make mistakes in punctuation. Of course, if you point that out, if that's something that you care about, then that's going to change their value proposition. So I just think that AI is kind of raising the bar of what we are trying to do when we're interacting in our discussion boards and in our community spaces like Yellow Dig. And you really, the idea of relevancy has just really shot up, making sure that these conversations are highly relevant. And again, that value proposition that they're worth doing and that they are moving and alive and fresh. There's a reason to go back. So, and in the chat, if you all have additional ideas in the chat, I'd love to hear them because, yeah, AI is definitely changing a lot. So being somewhere in the middle, like not being either phobic and not being a fan, I'm somewhere in this middle space, just trying to navigate this really messy middle space. Yeah, what do you think, Alan?
So I just had an internet or a message saying my internet was unstable. So hopefully everything comes across okay here. Just let me know if I freeze. The analogy that I've used with AI is that when I was in middle school, Kmart came out with like a cheap pocket calculator, but they were outlawed in our school. Now, fast forward when my kids were in middle school and I had to buy a $100 graphing calculator for each of them because it was required. And I feel that Gen AI is starting out like that and also heading in the same direction. Most instructors' visceral response is to outlaw it, to detect it whenever possible, and to penalize students for using it. But if we fast forward 5 or 10 years, I feel that most schools, some already, are giving students access to advanced AI tools, just like we give them access to Microsoft Office and Google Suite now. But right now, we're in the messy period with AI. I liken the AI on the education landscape as being like a volcano. There's this eruption that's happening right now. It's changing the landscape of the mountainside. It's changing the landscape of education. We weren't ready for it. We were caught off guard in many ways. It has a lot of energy right now, right? A lot of energy is focused on AI. There's not a institution that isn't thinking about what they should or shouldn't be doing with regard to AI. And right now, there's a lot of dust in the air. We almost have to wait for the dust to settle before we realize how AI is going to best help education and how it's not going to help education. So we're in that messy period right now. I think that we need to help students leverage the power of AI. We don't want to graduate students who weren't allowed to use AI at all in their program, and therefore they get into a job and they don't know how to use AI in their job. I tell our students that if you are the type of student who's trying to get out of work by having AI do it for you, then you're going to be the type of employee who goes to an 8-hour workday and uses AI to get out of 4 hours of the work. Versus a classmate who might be sitting next to you who goes to that 8-hour workday, uses AI to get 12 hours of productivity out of that 8 hours. Well, who's going to get promoted when it comes time to elevate somebody or to, create a new position? It's going to be the people who know how to leverage AI and are able to use that as a lever to empower and make their contribution even greater. And so we need to help students be able to do that, but we also need to help them to use it wisely and responsibly and not as a replacement. We don't want the AI to replace their cognition. We want it to empower what they're doing and saying. And so I think that there are some keys to helping AI find that proper place. I will say that if you do personalize an assignment, yes, I can write a prompt that will tell you, oh, I had this wonderful internship experience, just make it up and then I'm going to post it. Except that I'm posting that and saying that it was my experience. And so if you really do have community, and engagement. Well, what if somebody asks me about something that I posted that was written by AI? I'm not going to be able to answer that. And I think that students will, there is a desire across students to want to be authentic. And you can tap into that by saying, hey, I'm really curious as to what you say. And if somebody posts something that was AI generated, you can question them and say, really, that's what you think? The other thing that I would just say is that AI, who knows where we're going to be? AI, some of our faculty are saying, well, 2 years ago it couldn't answer my test questions, and now it can. And so 2 years from now, it's going to be even more capable than it is now. But I feel that allowing that community, asking questions, getting away from the post once, respond twice, finding the most engaging aspects of your course. And then, as Stacy said, lowering the bar so that it's not this high stakes, and I'm too afraid that I'm going to mess up and not get the points. We find with Yellow Dig that half of the class, every class that we've had, exceeds the point total in Yellow Dig that they're supposed to. They don't get extra credit. They only get up to 100% for that component of the course. And yet they're still contributing to the Yellow Dig community, even though it doesn't benefit them from a points perspective. And just below that, 50%, we see another maybe 10 or 15% that are right at or just below the max. They're getting like 90, 95% of the points expectation. And then we may see it drop off. And in Yellow Dig, there may be some students that have dropped the class in week one, but they're still visible in Yellow Dig. And so they're at the bottom of the tier there. But if our Yellow Dig communities are having students communicate beyond the requirement for the course, that's what we're trying to do. And we haven't engineered that. It's just happened by building Yellow Dig topics and communities that are things students want to participate in.
I love that. And I love the way you are coming back into our next slide. So thank you so much, Alan, for, driving into the direction of our next slide. So I know that we wanted to talk openly about what's happening in the education environment, what we are seeing right now. So, but we also wanted to share the opportunity to talk about a little bit of what Yellow do and what it can do to your classes. So with what Alan and Stacey have been mentioning here and there about Yaldi, there are three ways that Yaldi community improves your course, and it goes hand in hand with what we were talking today. So the first one is belonging, then less grading, more guiding, because you become a part of the community, not just a moderator or a controller. And an engagement that lasts. Why does it last? Because as Alan was telling about, it helps your students to want to be a part, to share what they are seeing, to communicate within each other. So, if there's one thing that you want your colleagues to know about building engagement with Yelvic, what would it be, Stacy?
Okay, I can't pick one. So I'm breaking the rules. This first, I'll just say it harkens back to what I had said earlier, is just to make certain you're clear about why you're wanting to use Yellow Dig, because it is a poor fit. You'll be disappointed if you are trying to use it to assess individual learning. I think you'll also be disappointed if you think that you can do a set it and forget it, and that this community will just spontaneously arise and it will be amazing and you never have to be there. So that's not going to be a great fit, but it will be a good fit if you want to have really meaningful conversations about your course topics and that you're willing to help guide and facilitate those conversations. So I just think you have to make sure there's instructional alignment in what you're trying to do and make sure that that matches. And sometimes we tell instructors, what you're trying to do is actually better as a quiz, or this sounds more like an assignment. So I would say, again, just make sure that you're using Yellow Dig for the right reasons. And then secondly, whenever we talk about engagement, I would like for my colleagues to know about the dimensions of engagement, that it's not just a singular construct, that you have behavioral engagement. And that's like, are they participating? That's behavioral, right? And you can measure that and you can look at the analytics and you can get some of that, the clicks and the responses. But then you have cognitive engagement, right? And that's, are they thinking deeply? Are they making connections? Are they advancing their learning? But you also have emotional engagement. And that's something I care a lot about. And that is, do they feel interested and connected and curious and motivated to return? And I think that's where Yellow Dig is really, really well suited, is to really try to spark that emotional engagement. So I think if you think about that, I mean, we also know that that emotional engagement, it's a tied to all kinds of learning outcomes. You know, if they are coming back and they are reading and they are curious, they might go further and go beyond. So it's by no means just kind of a nice to have or an extra. It's absolutely connected to their learning. And that's also the way to open the door to that intrinsic motivation, right? So if they're feeling that kind of emotional connection, it'll start moving from I'm just doing this to earn points to I'm doing this because I'm really interested and engaged. So in thinking about engagement, I just would encourage thinking about it a little bit more broadly than as a sort of a singular construct. What do you think, Alan?
Thanks. So, you'll hear the word gamification often used and even used in reference to Yellow Dig. And I think that's because Yellow Dig helps incentivize the behaviors that we want to see in our class. Post early, post often, and post quality. Because if I post early, then I'm going to get more opportunity for students to comment on my post, which gives me residual points. If I post quality, then I'm going to have more people posting in response and engaging with my post versus if I just said, you go girl, and that was my post. There's not going to be much interaction there. Um, but we find that because it incentivizes those behaviors, the faculty can actually take a role, as we've mentioned a few times before, of being just a member of the community. You don't have to be the swami, so to speak, and because sometimes there's a good conversation happening, but then all of a sudden the instructor chimes in and he or she shuts down all conversation. Well, I don't want to add to that because the instructor said something. The instructor can actually be just a member of the community, and if they see that the discussion is winding down, they can spark it up again by throwing in another thought into the mix and try to get that engagement and that discussion going again, even though it naturally started to die down. But because they can be a member of the community, it's because they're not having to worry about the points. Like, well, I have to grade each and every post. I have to moderate everything and make sure it's okay. You can allow some of that to just be happening in Yellow Dig, and then you can actually contribute as a member, but as like a team lead member of the community to make sure that you are meeting some of your learning objectives through what's happening in the Yellow Dig post or in the discussions.
Amazing. I don't know, Stacy, if you want to complement something with what you shared in the chat.
Oh, I just wanted to say that there's a lot of really interesting research about instructors' involvements in. I think a lot of it has to do with online discussion boards specifically, but I think you can generalize. I think some of that can generalize, but it just really backs up what Alan said about how you can unintentionally shut down a good conversation if you're not at the right timing. So I think that's interesting to kind of go look at some of that research, and maybe we could follow up with an article or two post webinar. I find it fascinating.
Yeah, I think that some of the things that you are sharing here are very interesting, and I found them fascinating too because I think we are a work in progress. Online learning keeps evolving, keeps changing, and we have to keep adapting. So let's move into the next slide. Thank you for sharing how you use Yellow Big and what has done for you. So now we come to the practical part of our webinar. So, Alan, what do you think are some practical ideas that you can share that the people that are here sharing their webinar can start to apply immediately?
Yes, so I'll give you two examples, and one of them Stacy mentioned earlier. We have one instructor who he teaches statistics, And his first question in Yellow Dig is introduce yourselves, but I want you to introduce yourselves with two truths and a lie about yourself. So post, two truths and one that's a lie. And in Yellow Dig, you can actually make them into a poll so that the students, when they read those, they can actually vote on which one they think is the lie. And in Yellow Dig 2, you can specify whether you want those who have not yet responded to the poll to see the current voting pattern or not. And so the instructor leaves it up to the students. Here are my the instructor does it too. Here are my true truths and a lie. I'm not letting you see how other people have voted. You have to vote blindly. But then once you vote, you see how everybody else in the class so far has voted. And it's interesting because it sparks a very unique way of introducing themselves. It makes it engaging because now I have to figure out, well, which one of these things is the lie for each of my classmates? And oh, you went to high school in that area of Philadelphia. You were our football rivals, right? So like it gets this like discussion going in another area. But then I mentioned that he's a statistics professor. So in week 2, he is asking them, how did seeing or not seeing how the voting was going impact did it sway you when you were trying to decide which one was the lie for the people whose poll results were visible to you before you voted? And so he actually was able to bring that back. And so some of the aspect of having these tools within Yellow Dig makes some things possible that are otherwise hard. Here's my second example along those lines. One of the ways we find faculty are trying to combat the simple get an AI response and post it into the discussion is by using media and having the students record a video of themselves with their response. It could either be something off the cuff, it could even be something that they used AI to help generate, but they're going to have to read that script and make it convincing that this is how they think and how they feel. And so again, Yellow Dig has a tool right in there where you can say, I want people to respond with a video, and then they can actually, right in the web page, just hit record and record their response. If they don't like it, they can record again. But then again, that's bringing in that human element, and also harder to fake with AI. Like if I'm reading something that I don't understand, that's going to probably become apparent in the third sentence. And so those are two ideas that I have to mention. Stacy?
Those are good. So yeah, what Alan said. The three things that I was thinking of, one goes back to, again, the purpose. I know maybe it's more of a general idea than a practical idea, but I just very much encourage you to start out by explaining the purpose very early. And if you can tell students why you're doing it and that this aligns with your teaching philosophy, that can really help them feel more open to it. It's sort of foregrounding for them the purpose. You could even share, if you wanted to, about the power of, sense of community for learning and persistence and well-being. I mean, there's a lot of great literature out there. So maybe you could even say, this actually is connected to your learning and connected to your success. I'm not just doing this because it's an extra thing that you have to attend to, but I am aware of how this actually supports your learning and the learning of your peers. Secondly, I have seen instructors have a lot of success with setting up really meaningful topics ahead of time so that, again, you're not just doing week 1, week 2, week 3, like don't do that, but having really good course specific topics. So that will also show them, okay, here are some different landing places. I know some people like to have a social lounge as well. That could be like a no points area. Alan, I don't know if you do that or if you've seen other instructors do it, but it's just a place where you say, hey, could be for any kind of additional conversation. And I've seen instructors say students start talking, they start networking, job sharing. So really neat things can happen there. And then Ellen talked about this earlier with the custom accolade, the read this. I think that is also a really good way to signal what you value. Maybe you are looking for less you go girl, like you said, Alan, and more I respectfully disagree. Like maybe you want students to challenge each other, but in a really courteous way, which you can do. How to be assertive and not aggressive whenever you're doing that, or how to have a crucial conversation. Maybe you could do a crucial conversation accolade. But if you do that and you want to see students, digging more deeply into ideas and maybe checking or questioning, or you could do like a questioning one. So I think the use of those custom accolades, of course, it has to align with what you're teaching. And if it's graduate students, maybe you really want to see that. So definitely model and recognize what you value, and you'll bring out that in your students.
Amazing. Those are really incredible ideas that you can start using right away. Even if you're not using us in Yellow, you can just adapt what Alan and Stacy has shared into the elements that you're using or the discussion board that you're using. But we give you an extra plus. So, Kate, let's move into the next slide. So I'm just going to share with all of you our final takeaway. So we know that the future of learning isn't about content delivery, but about designing experiences students want to return to. And one of the most valuable parts of learning are still deeply human. So anything else that you would like to add, Stacy?
Well, humanizing online instruction is definitely one of my areas of keen interest. And I really focused my dissertation work around how to cultivate a sense of community in online programs. So this topic has aligned so well with my interests. But in thinking about some final takeaways, Alan spoke earlier about the Reddit and social media, and I do think there is some real value in thinking about what makes people, including adults and our parents, return to social media in their personal lives. And to think about the borrowing the healthy aspects of that, the healthy engagement principles. I know that there's a dark side, but why is there so much stickiness? And some of those things have to do with the novelty, the relevance, the choice, the feedback, like that recognition. And that's something that we can build on in our courses. So again, it's taking the good sides. Invite your students to share images, headlines, videos, examples from practice, things that are interesting and relevant to them. Give them some choice in how they contribute, and recognize meaningful participation through your comments, through your emojis, through your accolades. And again, the goal is not to recreate Instagram or Facebook, but it is to bring some more energy into our academic conversations. So in a nutshell, students are more likely to return and find your Yellow Dig community worthwhile if it feels fresh, interesting, and valuable. So you can do it. I would end with just a little, you've got this. What do you think? What's your final takeaway, Alan?
So when I give advice to new teachers, I talk about the first class period challenge. For me, I want to spark that interest. And this is face to face. It doesn't matter, what the delivery mechanism is. If they were to call their mom or dad and their parent were to say, "Hey, how is your first day of classes?" I'd want them to say something like, "Oh, not bad. I've got one class that seems pretty cool." Like that's what I want to be, is that one that their antenna is raised that says, "Hey, this might go somewhere. This might be interesting." And I would also say that in order to do that, as Stacy mentioned before, we have to do some things differently than we might have been taught or that we might have done before. And so the next time you're teaching and you have online discussions, try a two truths and a lie. Try, hey, look around the world and bring in principles that you see, in the real world and why you think those are working or not working. Or give me an example from your regular experience that you feel free to share, and try it. If it doesn't get traction, if it doesn't work, that's fine. No sweat. Move on. Find something else. But then think about trying other things. What I liked about today and our time together is that there were so many little ideas that you may have just hooked onto one or two of them and said, "Oh, I want to try that next time." So go ahead, try it, see if it works. You may need to adjust it to your context or your discipline, and that's fine. But be energetic. Like Stacy said a few times, model what you want the students to do. And so model being different in those online discussions.
I love that. Thank you so much, Alan and Stacy, for sharing this. Thank you for sharing in the chat, Stacy, that link. I will share with our post email with the recording of this webinar when we send to all the people that attend and couldn't join. So, with that said, let's go into our last slide. I think we're having a quiet audience today here. So, I don't know if any of you have any questions, comments, suggestions that you want to share with our speakers, something that you want to ask. I don't see any in the chat. I don't know if someone wants us to open the mic so you can ask something to our speakers. Um, No, I don't see any volunteers. So if that's the case, I just wanted to thank you all for joining here in the webinar. Thank you, Alan and Stacey, again for being a part of this conversation and for sharing all your experience and your knowledge. I know that you have a lot of background, and this is why your conversation and your sharing was very interesting for all of us. So thank you again for being a part of this webinar, and we will see each other in a future webinar. So thank you for joining, and I hope you have a great Thursday. Bye bye.